Hey, it's syndicated radio talk show host, author, singer Al Cole, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. I come from CBS Radio. My shows are nationally syndicated, and I've helped pave the way to treating women, guys too, with the dignity that they deserve. And my shows are aired on very dignified networks, including the biggest airing CBS shows, and that's Apple's iTunes Radio Network under their professional news talk division, airing CBS shows, Fox News, NPR, BBC, C-SPAN, best talk in the country. Around the world on Apple's iTunes Radio Network is under News Talk. And coming from CBS Radio, I'm also a major media consultant. And that means that I've helped hundreds of people to find out some of the right directions to take when they're moving their books and other products and services, how to make money through it, how to be entrepreneurial and even make a living through their products and services. And you can go to my website, peopleofdistinction.org. You can see that, read up on it. And you can hear my Apple streams on peopleofdistinction.org and see some of my national associates, such as Ariana Huffington, the founder of the Huffington Post. And if you like all of that stuff, you can email me at al@alcoholic.com. You heard me right. That's AL@ALCOLEHOLIC.com. And I really want to thank my CBS Radio listeners for coming up with that handle, Alcoholic. Seems like from day one, my listeners have been saying, Al, we love what you're doing there, brother. In fact, we're hooked on it. We're alcoholics. And I'm also a New York Times best-selling author with Chicken Soup for the Soul. Chicken Soup for the Soul is distributed by CBS's Simon & Schuster. So we keep it in the family that way. Coming up, a guy who is really into our human family. And that's why he was invited to People of Distinction today to talk about his book. And this guy's name is Rob Bollendorf. And his book, it's a different sort of title here, Walks Tall the Moon. And the subtitle is Learning Mindfulness. Now, what does that mean? A lot of my listeners right now, Al, boy, I like that title. It sounds gripping, but what does it really mean? All right, I'm going to break it down this way. Now, Rob has a long and really illustrious career as a college professor. That means he's an educator, and he's a very educated guy. And he understands something about mindfulness. Now, my listening audience, we talk about that probably every show in different ways, because our People of Distinction brand is about mindfulness. It's about using your mind in ways that can help not only you, but our human family development that way. And in this case, the mindfulness that Rob is talking about, and we'll be talking about from his book, Walks Tall the Moon, is a Native American boy with attention problems. Now, it sounds, pretty everyday. A lot of kids have attention problems. We know that. And yet those attention problems maybe are not dealt with in the way that they should be dealt with. Sometimes we think that the kid is the problem rather than maybe the teaching methods. Or sometimes we think that, it's not either one. It's something else. Well, maybe it is something else. Maybe that child has to learn about mindfulness a little bit more. And in his book, Walks Tall the Moon, Rob talks about that. A Native American boy with attention problems learns mindfulness. Wow. Even at that young age, people, we are all human beings. And human beings come out a certain way with that fully developed brain at that point. And they can learn how to use that brain even more constructively if we care. And Rob cares. And if the educational system will allow that kid to do that. And, Rob being a college professor and maybe a former college professor, he knows ways to get through to young kids that way. And Native American kids, they need it more than anybody. We know about the Native American culture, and we know how gruesomely Native Americans have been treated in our society. And so, we have to give back that way. And Rob gives back. We can expand our own brain power, people. Whoa, believe it. And when you listen to Rob, you're really going to be a believer, because he is an expositor of this. He's an expert at this stuff. And if you like it, and I know you will, I want you to order that book, Walks Tall the Moon, Learning Mindfulness, at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And you can also run to Rob's website to learn more, and that is fightingaddictionwithfiction.com. And I'm going to welcome Rob on right after I tell you who brought Rob to People of Distinction today. Great publishing company called Link, and they're a wonderful mover of books in the industry. You got a book, you got to move. Well, you got to move it through Link. Go to urlinkpublishing.com. Welcome, Rob, to People of Distinction with Al Cole today. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
I really like your website, Alcoholic. I've written several books on addiction, so we're a perfect match.
Well, I like that. We're going to have to invent a new term, Bollendorf holic.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility, Rob?
It's quite as easy.
We'll make it easy here, and we'll make it particularly easy with my sidekick, who is also my son, and his name is Benji Cole. Now, Benji is an actor in Los Angeles who's been on stage with the likes of Tom Hanks and a whole bunch of others. And he's also a filmmaker, and he's adding to Al Cole Enterprises with his great interviewing skills. So Benji's going to take it over right now. I'll introduce Benji, and he'll do the interview with Rob today. And then I'll come back at the end of the show and just cap things off. So welcome, Benji, to People of Distinction with Al Cole. How are you doing today, Benji?
I'm great, Al. Thank you very much. Again, always a pleasure to be here on the show with you.
All right. So you take it from this point on with our guest, Rob Bollendorf, and we'll have a great interview. So it's all yours right now, Benji.
Absolutely. All right. So as Al has already pointed out, Rob Bollendorf, Walks Tall the Moon, Learning Mindfulness. So let's just jump right in. Rob, tell us a little bit about the book before we're not giving too much away, of course, but if we can get a brief synopsis just for our listening audience there, please.
Sure. Well, Walks Tall is a Native American boy. The moon part comes a little bit later on. He is had a pretty normal life until he went for a walk in the woods with his mother, and they met a bear with cubs and got in between them. His mother saved him, but unfortunately in the process she died. And after that point, Tall Moon began to have a lot of problems, particularly in school with paying attention.
Absolutely.
And the teachers would constantly be after him saying, pay attention, but he wasn't quite sure how to do that, and his mind didn't seem quite capable of doing that. So the elders decided that they would help him by having him do a vision quest. Now, a vision quest has three very important parts: nature, solitude, and fasting. Since he was young, they decided to modify it a little bit to make it a little bit easier. And they also gave him a trainer who was his uncle. And he taught him about a little bit about mindfulness. And as they walked to the point where he was going to be doing the vision quest, which would last 3 days. The first day would be fasting. After that, he could eat and drink small amounts. And in the process, he pretty much teaches himself some of the important aspects of mindfulness and some techniques to make it a little easier for him. Mm-hmm. That's sort of a little bit of an introduction. I got my inspiration from listening to Christopher Willard do a presentation on teaching mindfulness to kids. And he introduced several techniques, and many of the techniques are included in the book.
Perfect. Well, I'll tell you, just listening to you talk, Rob, I could definitely think of a few people that come to mind that could probably take advantage of this vision quest that you were talking about to help learn a little bit of mindfulness that way, right? So that's great, and I appreciate you explaining, the inspiration behind the book, so our audience knows really where this all has come from, and what kind of sparked that interest there for you. Leading off of that, if there was one thing that our audience members would have to know about this book, what would you say that is?
Well, as I said, they're going to learn mindfulness techniques through reading the book. If they stop there, what they will get out of it is limited. But if they will practice the techniques, and at the end of the book I list several of them and encourage them to pick one or two, there's been something like 30,000 published, researched articles that prove, in effect, that mindfulness actually increases the size and function of the brain.
Oh, wow.
And what's particularly important about that is that these parts of the brain that are increased in size and function will help them to make better decisions, to avoid so many of the pitfalls that we know that exist for teenagers today, from driving the car too fast, through experimenting with alcohol and drugs, to choosing the wrong friendships, etc.
Absolutely.
And not only that, these techniques also help them with some of the negative things that they will for certain run into in their life, such as anxiety, depression, anger issues, etc. And if they practice this on a regular basis, they'll decrease the negative and increase the positive. And we certainly know that kids today need that probably more than any earlier generation did.
Absolutely. What I find so fascinating, Rob, is listening to you talk about this. I mean, what I think is very, very well done and done in a very creative way on your part is this is something that, of course, the book is fiction, correct? So it's a created story that you've developed this way, but it's also something that is so apparent and so applicable to our human family in everyday life. And I think that that's a very creative approach rather than just going directly with a book that just specifically teaches about mindfulness, So that's a great way to kind of to go about it. Now, of course, we don't want to go into too much detail on that, leave it for our audience to go and buy the book. But is it possible, can you share just maybe one technique that as you were kind of doing your research and figured out that you can potentially share with our audience in terms of learning more mindfulness? Is there a specific technique that really jumped out to you?
Sure. It's a little one of my favorites is called the 5-finger technique.
Okay.
First of all, again, almost all of the techniques start with taking a breath. So it's as simple as that. You're actually paying attention to simply breathing. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that, and that's really all mindfulness is paying attention to breathing. However, most beginners have a heck of a time continuing to focus on that. So they'll pay attention to a couple of breaths, their mind will wander. And the idea is, again, without judgment or criticism, simply bring the mind back to the breath. But that gets discouraging. So one of the things that one of the techniques in the book is simply called the 5-finger technique. So you imagine you could put one hand, either right or left, in front of your face. And with the other hand, start at the bottom of the thumb and work your way up to the top of the thumb. And while doing that, breathe in. Do a tiny pause at the top of the thumb. And as your finger goes down the bottom of the thumb, breathe out. Then you're heading up towards your index finger. Again, same thing. Breathe in, pause at the top, breathe out, pause at the bottom, middle finger, breathe in, pause at the top, breathe out, pause at the bottom. Ring finger, same thing. Little finger, same thing. Now you've taken 5 breaths, and you've paid attention to all 5 of those breaths. And you have the added concentration on the visualization of the hand, but also the tactile stimulation of running your finger up and down each finger. I hope that made sense to your listening audience.
Absolutely, Rob. Yeah, we definitely were able to follow you along on that. And just quickly to touch base with the listening audience, we're on the line here with Robert Bollendorf, talking about Walks Tall the Moon, Learning Mindfulness. That's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And, Rob, as you were talking, I couldn't help but make the connection. Of course, I have the acting background, and a lot of our techniques in terms of the voice and movement techniques that we learn, it's very similar to almost, I guess, a meditation type technique, and it kind of resembled what you were talking about. Yeah. Just really connecting your mind to your breath and being in the moment, taking all the outside distractions out, because we know that in today's 21st century, I mean, there's so many things that our sensories are kind of combating with. A lot of times it's very hard to just be in the moment and allow yourself to just be connected and be grounded that way. So hearing you go over that technique was something that just kept coming back to me, and it was a very, very similar thing that I'm accustomed to, and I'm sure our listening audience will be able to relate to as well. So thank you very much for that, Rob.
Another example that I won't go into detail, but is simply paying attention to how you walk, which I'm sure is something you do in acting school and things along that line. And what paying attention to your facial expressions is crucial to acting.
Right. So, yes, of course, yeah. So really, I want to transition now, Rob. So I know you have a canon of books. I mean, you have a repertoire of many books that you've mentioned. I think you have another 7 or 8 books that you've been able to construct thus far. Now, there's a website associated with this, correct? And I know my father, Al, has already brought it up. Tell us a little bit about your website, Fighting Addiction with Fiction, and where did that come about?
Okay. As I said, I taught in college for 40 years, and one of the biggest programs that we had was called addictions counseling. And my very first book was called Sober Spring, and it was, again, a story and novel, because I just find that people engage in that so much easier than they do textbooks. And it was teaching a family how to do an intervention. And then I followed that up with a second book called Flight of the Loon, which went into relapse and recovery issues in addiction and alcohol. And then the third book was called Autumn Snow, and another one, Witch of Winter. Autumn Snow was about cocaine, Witch of Winter about heroin. And as we know, there's 1,000 people a day dying from heroin.
Yeah.
Then I wrote a book called The Challenger, which covered PTSD, and there's 21 veterans a day committing suicide, mostly the results of PTSD and brain injury. So they're all stories. And again, all but 2 of them have a Native American theme. Even though I'm not Native American, and by the way, I just used the background from the Vision Quest as a way to introduce mindfulness. Really, the 2 are very, very well connected, but not necessarily the same thing.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for all of that. So again, as our listening audience, I mean, they can find all of your books on fightingaddictionwithfiction.com. We're on the line with Robert Bollendorf, Walks Tall the Moon, Learning Mindfulness, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Rob, thank you so much for being with us here on People of Distinction today. We truly appreciate it. I know you've.
Well, I appreciate it too. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, no, it's been fantastic, and truly the pleasure has been all mine. I've absolutely loved doing this interview. It's been amazing, and like I said, a lot of connections that way that we really can apply to our daily life, and that is something that a lot of times we don't really we don't get so much, depending on the book that we're talking. So specifically with this, it's been easily applied that way, and very easily relatable. So go and check out his books on fightingaddictionwithfiction.com. Again, on the line with Robert Bollendorf. Thank you very much for being with us, Rob.
Thank you. And if you want to make any of my books into movies, feel free.
Absolutely. I just might. We'll be reaching out to you, Rob.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Benji is a wonderful filmmaker. Maybe a film trailer, something like that, Rob, that maybe we can talk about offline. For right now, Walks Tall the Moon. That's what to buy here. Learning Mindfulness. And it's yours at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And you can go to his website, fightingaddictionwithfiction.com. And, this goes out to you, my listening audience, on People of Distinction, what Rob was talking about, very proactive things. Wonderful interview by my son, Benji, and wonderful explications by Rob Bollendorf, our special guest, about ways that we can help each other and certain really socially proactive directions that Rob has been taking as an educator, college professor, as somebody who cares about our human family development, and particularly a Native American boy with attention problems, and then he turns it around through mindfulness and meditation, things along that line. The biggest thing to be mindful of, people, are that we all have at least one thing in common. We have many things in common, but one of the biggest things that we have in common is that we're all born babies. Now, if we take that to heart, we have to think of that baby who was you at one point, who came out and said, wow, I'm here. I made it. I'm actually alive. And that baby thinking, this is the greatest blessing in the world, just to be alive at all. Now, get that, people. You're already ahead of the game because you were born at all. And that gave you a mind right there. Use it. And as you use your mindfulness, think back about that innocence of love that baby within you had for life itself upon birth, and maybe as a child, and rolling in the grass and looking up at the sky and the cloud formations, getting to understand nature and maybe the invisible friends that little child had at certain points, and the hopes and the dreams. We don't want to crush that. Let's develop our hopes and dreams, not only for ourselves, not only for that baby that was born in the first place, but also for every baby that was born. That means our human family, all of humanity. We deserve it, whether rich or poor, black or white, or any other race, no matter what religion, no matter what generation. We need to be mindful that we are living on a single planet contemporaneously at the same time. And we can reach out to each other with similar problems and similar ways to solve those problems. And also, what about the ecstasies? All of the things that we love about life. There are other people who love the same things. And we are brought together that way through being mindful of those factors in our lives and everybody else's life. That's People of Distinction way of putting it. And Rob put it his way wonderfully in his book, Walks Tall the Moon, Learning Mindfulness, available to you again at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and his website, fightingaddictionwithfiction.com. And remember, he was brought to us by UR-Link Publishing, one of the best in the publishing world. Well, you want to move your book, move it through UR-Link. Go to urlinkpublishing.com. Thank you so much, Rob, for being our special guest on People of Distinction with Al Cole. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best with your book and your life directions. Thanks again, Rob.
Thank you.
how did you like Benji's interview of you?
Oh, that was great. It was fun.